welcome to First and Filoni. This is another solo episode here, so pretty quick. But to start off, I do want to say happy birthday to my co-host Andrew, and then obviously my fiance as well, Elise. Happy birthday, even though this is coming out a day after your birthday. But let's just go ahead and get started, get this going. Short episode again. We'll be back to full-time scheduling next week. Um, so what's new here to start off? The first coach of the season has been fired. Southern Miss's Will Hall has been fired for starting 1-6 this season and 14-30 overall. Not really a surprise there. I guess maybe it is G5 level, so it could be technically a surprise. And it's not a Power Four coach being fired, but I don't foresee this to start the domino effect just yet. But I do have some coaches that are on the hot. We'll discuss three coaches that are on the hot seat for the Power Four level that I believe could be fired soon, or if not by the end of the year. So the first one being Neil Brown from West Virginia. I thought he should have been fired last year before the season started, but then he had a really good season last year, which set his expectations to be pretty high with a lot of returning production, a returning starting quarterback, and running back. But they just have been average at best. And to be honest with you, college football is not the same when West Virginia isn't good. So I think he's on the hot seat, especially if they keep losing the way that they are. I could see them maybe firing him as early as next week. I definitely don't think he's the long-term solution there. So my question is, could Jimbo Fisher go back to his roots in his home state and take over the position of head coach at West Virginia? And would West Virginia like that? The easy answer is West Virginia would love it. Recruiting would be great. Jimbo Fisher could potentially resurrect his career in a weaker Big 12 conference than the SEC when he was at Texas A&M. I think it would be a good fit all around. Um, will he do it though? I don't know. I think if his clause doesn't says he cannot work um, while he's getting paid by Texas A&M still with that 78 million, he's not going to go obviously. But if he says he can work and there's nothing saying he can't, um, West Virginia doesn't even have to pay him that much, and it could get him back up to where he wants to be with a contender for the college football playoffs. Um, the second coach that I think is on the hot seat, and I wouldn't be surprised if they lose this weekend, and he gets fired this weekend, is Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell, everybody thinks FSU is a very, very good program over the last couple of years, but in all truth, Florida State's not good. Like they have a losing record under Mike Norvell. They've had one good season, and that was solely because of Jordan Travis playing out of his mind. But once Jordan Travis got hurt last year, they won two games, but it wasn't by a lot, and then they got pounded by Georgia in the bowl game. This season also, for Florida State, poor Florida State fans, being plagued by the dog poo curse. Some say dog poop, but it was found out that that dog poop was not dog poop. It was actually chocolate. So the curse still stands. Um, I don't think they beat Miami this weekend. They're 21-point underdogs. Uh, I can foresee Florida State firing him. And then you have the question of how many wins do they have on their schedule, and maybe one or two winnable games going forward. So I don't know. Could this be Deion Sanders coming home? Potentially, right? His sons will both be graduated or in the NFL. Potentially, maybe not Shiloh, but definitely Shador will be in the NFL. And if he wants to continue to coach at Colorado, or if he wants to come down to a much warmer climate in Florida State, that could be a possibility. And then the final one is Billy Napier. Florida's having a decent season now, but they should have one or two more wins than they already do, especially with the schedule they had. DJ Lagway is in full effect. That's the only reason why I think Florida hasn't fired Billy Napier just yet. So Lagway didn't redshirt. And same thing with Baugh, right? Jaden Baugh didn't want him to redshirt either, especially after the performance that he had last week. But I believe he's already lost his job. I think he's just like a dead man walking, unless he, goes 2-4 or 3-5 in the last 5 games of the season. They have Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, LSU, and Florida State. Um, I can see them winning Florida State, and that's really about it. I'm not sure if they're going to be competitive with any other team unless hypothetically Ole Miss and LSU would have just given up by the end of the season. I think he needs to win at least three of the last five games for him to potentially stay and or beat Georgia handedly, which we all know that's not going to happen. The Napier experiment just hasn't worked out. He's produced great recruiting, seems to have built some pretty good structure for the program, and facilities have gotten much better under Napier, but the coaching on the field just hasn't been good enough. Um, my guess is we're seeing Lane Kiffin there next year, especially if Ole Miss loses again. Next thing we'll talk about is the upset meter alert. This weekend is a it's not a great slate. So we could have another sleepy weekend or we could have another upset weekend that will go along with the rest of the season. So I have four games to talk about that could be potentially on upset and put it on upset meter out of 10, 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, right? First game we'll talk about is Illinois at Oregon. Last week I put out a warning that Oregon would have had a potential scare against the Purdue spoiler makers. They of course did not. They won 35 nothing pretty easily. Illinois is having a great season. They do have a good offensive line and defense. They're disciplined on both sides of the ball. Bielema has the boys buzzing. Altmyer's looks great. Um, but they do have, a loss on the season, and it was versus Penn State, and Penn State won that pretty handily, even though the score was kind of lower. I think this is a 5.8 out of 10 on the upset alert meter. I think Oregon could and should win by 15 plus, but defense travels, and if Illinois gets up, say, two scores pretty quickly, even though it is at Oregon, which is a pretty raucous stadium to play, Illinois can slow the ball down. They have a solid offensive line and defense, play physical time possession football, and that's the way that Illinois will win, right? Well, I do think Oregon wins this pretty handily. Next game is Notre Dame versus Navy. The Army and Navy would be more of a concern for Notre Dame than Florida State. I definitely didn't, but they 100% are. Both service academies are undefeated. Um, and I think they both have a shot at Notre Dame. Now, Navy historically has given Notre Dame fits, and we know the history with Marcus Freeman having known losses to teams they should not. I mean, one already this year with Northern Illinois, and that was even at home. This one's not at home. It's at neutral field, I believe Yankee Stadium. Now, in a couple weeks, but Navy does have a potential upset to be found. I think this is more of like a 4.7 out of 10. I think Notre Dame uh, has found something that works for them with their defense buzzing. Riley Leonard having a pretty good year on offense, even though he's not throwing the ball well. Would I be surprised if Navy wins? Not that much, but I do, like I said, I do think Notre Dame has found a recipe for winning here. Um, in the recent weeks better than when they played Northern Illinois. Next game is Washington at Indiana. 11 win Indiana can't happen with a loss here, right? I do think I thought 9 wins at the beginning of the season could potentially happen. Now I think 11 since they are still undefeated. Does having all the national attention, having college game day there this weekend, and having their starting quarterback out be a recipe for a defeat? I think it's highly possible, right? Washington's, but they're not a bad team overall. They are in a rebuild mode under Jed Fish, with everybody leaving for the draft and transfer portal after Kalen DeBoer left. But I could see this coming down to the last 5 minutes, one, or I could see Indiana just stepping up at every other position and putting together a complete game like they did last week when they blew the brakes off Nebraska. I rate this a 6.2 out of 10 on the upset meter. I do think Indiana does win. I think they do rally behind a backup quarterback like the 22 to 18 or 18 to 22-year-olds typically do. So I would be more shocked if Washington did win this game. I think Indiana goes undefeated into the Ohio State game, and College Game Day will be at that game. I'm 100% sure. And then the final one is Texas at Vandy. Texas did not play well last week, right? Offensive line looked bad. Defense couldn't stop anything. Um, They had some interesting calls. They made a little bit of a comeback at the end. They even took Quinn Ewers out for a little bit to show that it wasn't Arch Manning. It was the offensive line that was mainly the issue. But on the other hand of that, Georgia looked the best they've looked all season besides the Clemson game at the beginning of the year. They finally put their defense together. Their pass rushers, Walker on the defense was just lighting up Ewers every chance he could get. Offensive line could not contain him. Um, this is also not your typical Vandy team where you automatically mark them as a win. We already saw Alabama come into Nashville and lose after getting a big win. Thing is, Texas didn't win last week. If Texas won last week, the upset alert would be a little bit higher. But Texas did not win that week, so I think this is a case where Texas flexes their muscles and wins big. Even though I'm pretty high on Vanderbilt this season, I think Clark Lea has a good recipe going forward with Vanderbilt as their head coach, unless he gets plucked by another team, which is highly possible as well. Um, so or I think it's a 4.2 out of 10 on the upset alert. Not that high on it. Would I be shocked if it happened? Not really. But do I think it's going to happen? No, I think Texas wins pretty big. Okay, so records for this week. We do have Andrew at 50 and 35. I'm at 56 and 35. And then the locks of the week are 48 and 37. We're finally starting to hit our groove here. I think I'm seeing the board pretty well. We'll see how it is going forward with this week. Player of the week this week is Jaden Baugh, a running back from Florida. I know this is a homer pick, right? But when you see set the freshman record for touchdowns in a game for the University of Florida, in the game where you have a freshman quarterback and freshman running back starting, which does not happen, you get the nod, right? Florida just destroyed Kentucky last week. Kentucky has a solid defense. Ball ran all over them. DJ Lagway had 7 completions for over 219 yards or something like that. It's just it was just a complete shellacking of Kentucky. But for the freshman running back here, he is a bruiser. He's a different type of running back than what Marshall Johnson is. And I think he's probably a better overall fit for the offense. We'll see how he does in 2 weeks versus Georgia, but I definitely had to give Jaden Baugh the nod there. Another one, Virginia Tech's Tootin, also had 5 touchdowns. He's, I believe, a junior, so I didn't give that to him, but he was definitely in consideration as well. No winners and losers this week. It was kind of more of the same. I guess if you had one winner, it was Georgia, and one loser was Texas. But I guess so saying the definite winner of the week is college football fans just in general. We do seem to have a repeat of 2007 season. I know I keep saying that, but it does seem like we are going in that direction, and that's always great for the sport, especially when we have the expanded 12-team playoff. Okay, now let's just get into our picks here. We have Syracuse at Pitt. Pitt is favored by 6 points. I really don't think Pitt's that good of a team, but I am going to go with them here. Syracuse 5-1, Pitt 6-0. Pretty good ACC matchup. I don't see them to be a threat in the ACC for a Clemson or Miami. I think he kind of works himself out here with this game. You'll see weaknesses for both sides of the ball. Boise State at UNLV, really, really fun game and a really good game for the G5 spot of the playoff. Boise is favored by 3.5. I think Ashton Jeanty continues his historic run, has a game that he needs to have for the Heisman again. Give me Boise here. Nebraska at Ohio State. Ohio State's favored by 25.5. I circled this game at the beginning of the season, thinking that Nebraska was going to be a little bit better. I think Ohio State wins. I think they win pretty big, especially after how Nebraska looked last week. Notre Dame versus Navy. Notre Dame's favored by 13 points. I like Notre Dame in this game, but I do think Navy has a shot. I think it's going to be Notre Dame winning, but Navy covering. Washington at Indiana. Indiana's favored by 6.5. I think they win. I think they win bigger than the 6.5. I think they rally behind the backup quarterback. Well, Rourke rests for the next week. Illinois at Oregon. We already talked about this one as well. Oregon's favored by 21.5 points. I think Oregon wins. I think Illinois keeps it close in the first half, but then Oregon pulls away at the end. Um, Missouri at Alabama. Bama's favored by 14 points. Last 3 weeks for Alabama have not looked great. 2 losses in their last 3 weeks. I think, if the players, I think Jalen Milroe's hurt. I don't think he's playing that great. But I think the players don't want to have that bad of a season, especially if, um, going forward, Kalen DeBoer is still going to be there. Transfer portal is going to happen. Kalen DeBoer will get a better program in place starting in the spring, but I think Alabama wins this as well. Texas at Vandy, already talked about it. I think Texas wins. They are favored by 18 and a half. I think they win by more. But Texas A&M, this is going to be a great game. Texas A&M is favored by 2.5, and field, I'm going with Texas A&M, but LSU has looked great in the last couple of weeks. And then potential game of the weekend, SMU at Duke. Um, Another high implementation game for the ACC. I think SMU wins this big. SMU's 11 and a half point favorites. They have a recipe right now that their offense just will put up 40 points on you in no time. Locks of the week. Like I said, we're doing pretty good. So here's some more. SMU versus Duke. Like I said, I think SMU wins by more than 11 and a half. UTSA versus Tulsa. I think UTSA covers the minus 7.5. So UTSA minus 7.5. Minnesota versus Maryland. Maryland had a great win last week, beat a USC team. I think they're a little bit too high. Minnesota plays a game where they win by more than 4. Florida State versus Miami. Miami's favored by 21 points. I think Florida State cannot lose by that many points. If they do, Norvell's gone. But also Miami last three games have played really close games. So give me FSU plus 21 points. Penn State versus Wisconsin. Give me the over 47 and a half. Both offenses will score. Wisconsin's played lights out ever since their starting quarterback has gone down. I see that continuing against a weak Penn State defense. Ohio State versus Nebraska. I already said Ohio State's going to win by more than 25 and a half points. Washington versus Indiana. I already said Indiana's going to win by more than 6.5 points. Ole Miss versus Oklahoma. Give me the over 48 and a half. Oklahoma does have a good defense, but Ole Miss needs to win this big. Maybe we'll see something on offense from Oklahoma, but um, we'll see on that one. UNC versus UVA. High on UVA this year. Give me UVA minus 4. I think they win by a touchdown. And then Arkansas, Mississippi State. Mississippi State has looked actually pretty good in their last couple starts. I think they might actually win this one outright. So give me Mississippi State plus 6.5. All right, and then the final thing here is we have players to watch. Pretty simple here. I think it's Quinn Ewers. He didn't look good since his injury, and it could be because he's still a little bit hurt, or it could have the fact that Arch Manning came in and played well. Now, Arch Manning did come in last week for a series or two. I can't remember, but after that, Quinn Ewers settled when he realized it wasn't him that was not playing great. I think he needs to have a great game here for Texas to get back on track. Arch Manning's time will come. It's just not right now. Okay, so that was it for this week. Like I said, short episode. Andrew should be back next week, and then we'll be getting into November and playoff time. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. Once again, please send in some more questions. Definitely, we'll be able to answer them going forward, and we appreciate you for tuning in. See you next week.